to say laissez-faire, but that's a French word, so I think market fundamentalism is a better way of describing, of believing that governments ought not to be involved in regulating the economy, and certainly international institutions shouldn't be allowed. And I think that is a false perception, because markets are, financial markets are inherently unstable. It's part of the system. And this goes contrary to the received wisdom of economic theory, which talks about equilibrium. Right now, everybody talks about imposing market discipline, as if that would take care of everything. I think you need to have an additional discipline, because if markets are inherently unstable, imposing market discipline, you are imposing instability. And how much instability can you live with? So you have to introduce this additional principle. Maintaining stability has to be an objective of public policy.
When you meet policymakers, you meet them all the time, what do you say to them about how they should tackle this problem?
Well, as soon as things calm down, I think that there really ought to be a serious re-examination of the system, and there has to be institutional changes. I've made some proposals. There are others. I think it's a process of, like you had at Bretton Woods, a conference discussing what needs to be done, out of which came the IMF and the World Bank. I think it's time to re-examine their mission and their functions, and learn some lessons.
Are you saying these institutions are past their sell-by date, or could they be remodeled?
No, I think actually we are very lucky that we have them. Without them, the system would have collapsed at least 3 times in the last 15 years. 1982, 1994, and 1997. So there's no way am I saying that they should be abolished. What I'm saying is that just as central banking developed in the 19th century, each time there was a crisis, there was an improvement in the institutional structure. We now have to do this, and the improvement that we have to make is recognize that we now have international financial markets. Therefore, we have to strengthen the international institutions. We have accomplished exactly the opposite of what we intended. We have accelerated the ethnic cleansing we sought to interdict. We have helped to consolidate in power the Milosevic regime, and we have helped to create instability in the neighboring countries of Montenegro, Macedonia, and Albania, not to mention the broader international implications, such as our relationship with China. It's obvious that something has gone woefully wrong, and we find ourselves in an awful quandary. We cannot bomb the world into submission, but we can't withdraw into isolation either. If we can't prevent atrocities like Kosovo, we must be willing to accept body bags. What I'm doing in Central Asia is what I've done in other countries as well, is empower people living in the country to do whatever they can to promote these ideas of open society and openness. I know that I'm an outsider. I have no real understanding of the region. I have no particular solution to offer for the problems of the region. All I can do is help the people there to help themselves. I had more money than I needed for my family. And what is it that I really care about? And that turns out to be a rather abstract idea, the idea of an open society. So critical thinking, democracy, market, these are the institutions that you need for people to be able to get closer to the truth and to improve their conditions in life.
From one Soros Foundation in Hungary, there is now a global network of foundations. and initiatives in over 60 countries.
When the government collapsed, practically anything that one could do to keep culture and administration going was a contribution. We can't change conditions on the ground everywhere. I mean, take a country like Kazakhstan. Is going to get richer as the oil fields are developed. So I feel that we can probably make a bigger contribution in helping the government to spend that money the right way in the right fields, like education, healthcare, small business development, and so on. I am not an advocate or believer of revolutions. Revolutions are basically destructive. It is only when conditions deteriorate to such an extent that people will not put up with it, that revolutions occur. I think it's much better if one can improve government gradually, and if the government doesn't regard the opposition as if they were devils. And neither does the opposition regard the government as if they were devils.
You've been watching Open Kyrgyzstan, a joint venture of the Soros Foundation and the Consultative Council for Good Governance.
This experiment in cooperation between the government and the Soros Foundation was not without its critics. Some in the government didn't trust Soros. Some in the opposition didn't think Soros should work with the government. They're easy prey for corrupt policemen.
To try to inform the migrants of their rights, human rights, when they are working in other countries, that I think is a top priority for the foundation, and the foundation is very actively engaged in it.
Take this. This is what you need to know about the law. Read it on the train. These are your rights and your responsibilities. There is also the address of our office in Moscow, our telephone number. Please, read it.
It's destiny. What is written will happen.
The foundation has made it a priority to fight the spread of HIV/AIDS, because people are not aware of it. They don't understand the dangers. But that particularly applies to migrant labor. They may be exposed to it and they take it back to their villages. And by the time the villagers become aware of it, the damage is done. Open society is not a dogma which gives you the final answers. Open society is the idea that nobody has the final answers, and therefore we must develop ways in which people who have different views and different interests can live together in peace and prosperity.
I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Eric Schmidt and Mr. George Soros.
My view of Mr. Soros is that he is one of the most important people in the world today in terms of the impact that he's had. He grew up in Eastern Europe, where in my reading of your background, your understanding of the world was much shaped by what you saw by the Nazis and by socialism and the fascism of the time. But because he's a clever guy, he eventually escaped and went to London, where he became quite the financial wizard. And for a few decades, George managed to invent a whole new industry, which we generally know now as financial derivatives, currency trading, and things like that. My first meeting with you was actually at the World Economic Forum about 10 years ago, and I happened to go from there to Malaysia, where I happened to meet with the Prime Minister of Malaysia, who spent a great deal of time complaining about you. And I thought, wow, a dictator really hates George Soros. Pretty interesting. So a few years later, we had dinner, and I asked George, what kind of an impact can you have on the world? And I didn't quite understand, because I was, I guess, stupid or something, how much impact he'd already had. In history, as it is fully understood, people will understand that the financial support and the structural support that he and his organization, in their first attempts at philanthropy, helped the Polish Solidarity movement, freedom movements in Hungary. And in fact, in our conversation a few years ago, third or fourth conversation, he described to me his objective, which was to help use the resources that he'd accumulated in his life to promote open society, open discussion. And I said, how do you do that? And he said, let's go and fund intellectuals, let's fund universities, let's fund smart people, and they'll take care of everything else. And indeed, he replicated that model around the world. So in more recent times, George has started to work on what he sees as the role of the United States, the U.S. presidency, and the political climate, not just in the United States, but about terrorism, which has resulted in this remarkable new book, The Age of Infallibility, The Age of Fallibility, excuse me. Infallibility is the other side, I guess. So I guess with that, we should say welcome to Google.
Thank you, thank you. I have to correct, it's a very nice introduction, and I appreciate it. I think that my role in the financial markets, you've exaggerated, because I did not invent hedge funds, and I know really quite not enough about derivatives and so on. So,
since 4 of the smartest and top people who manage that entire industry were hired, nurtured, and promoted by you, I think your credit is due.
thank you.
But in any case, congratulations on your tremendous success. Let me ask you a topic that's bothering me to get us started, and let me observe what I read in the press today. In Iraq, there are a lot of evidence that there's an emerging civil war. It's been relatively well established that the original justification for the invasion of Iraq was not supported by the evidence. We now have a very, very difficult ongoing battle between Lebanon and a set of people who are generally agreed to as terrorists, and Israel, and there's a great debate as to the tactics there. How did we get here? What did we do wrong? And what caused all of this?
Well, it's a very good question, because the situation really is very serious and deteriorating at a rather fast pace. In response to 9/11, declared war on terror, and that set the agenda for the world. And now we have a real war. So it's amazing how, I mean, this, in a way, it's a backward way of getting into my book. In the book, I start with a philosophy, a conceptual framework, where I explain the relationship between our thinking and the reality in which we participate. And I argue that because we are both observers and participants at the same time, our understanding is imperfect. But our biased, distorted understanding actually shapes reality. And this is really an amazing example of how a false perception can actually shape reality. And we now have a really serious war on our hand.
Now, in your past work in the last few years, you've spent a great deal of your time and money essentially trying to promote politicians other than President Bush and many of the other sort of people who are opposed to the current policies. You donated a great deal of money at one point to certain set of political action committees and so forth. So not only have you taken a position, but you put your money where your mouth was. And you've also drawn quite a bit of very, very vitriolic criticism for all of that in the United States. Why have you decided that President Bush and the current administration, in your words, is so terrible?
Well, you know, when I had made more money than was good for me, I decided what it is that I really care about, and I set up a foundation to promote open society throughout the world. And I got very much involved in various countries, particularly in the former Soviet Empire. And there I was standing up for principles of open society. And then, to my greatest amazement, I found that open society, as I understand it, is endangered in the United States. And so I felt obliged, having sort of backed a lot of people who stuck their neck out and really took very serious risks, to actually also to stand up and to stick my neck out, not taking anything like the risk that they had taken in their countries. So that's really what got me so involved in domestic politics. And I felt that as a citizen of the United States, somebody who has chosen this country as his home, and seeing that the country is moving in the wrong direction, I felt that I have got to get involved in America. And that's, at the time, I felt that if we could terminate President Bush's hold on the White House, that we could short-circuit what I think is a kind of a bubble. Or I called it, in my previous book, I called it the bubble of American supremacy, a false idea, but which nevertheless becomes part of reality. And I'm afraid that it would have been a wonderful thing to short-circuit it. But now we have the consequences. And it really is, I think, certainly Israel is now endangered in its existence. And I think our dominant position in the world has diminished to a much greater extent than even that I expected at the time when I wrote The Bubble of American Supremacy.
But one of the powers of information, which of course is what Google is promoting, is that misinformation, especially if it's done selectively, can be misused.
Right.
And that's always a great danger with more and more information.
Well, the problem is, you see, that you can't really base your decisions on information alone. Because you are making decisions which have to do with the future. You want to accomplish something. And what the result will be, that is not information, that's conjecture. And so you have to sort of bring some kind of perspective on the world to make those decisions. And that's where you have to introduce some judgment and bias, and that's not information, and it's not knowledge. So the idea that you can sort of base decisions on knowledge, that was in a way, the idea that was prevalent in the Enlightenment, and that was a fertile fallacy. So the opposite of a false metaphor is a fertile fallacy. And the Enlightenment was a fertile fallacy. But now we have discovered, I think, after having had 200 years of Enlightenment, that it isn't as we imagined it at the time, that there is the intellect and there is reality. And the two are separate. And you bring the intellect to bear on reality, you acquire knowledge, and you can base your decisions on that knowledge. It doesn't work that way, because we are part of reality. And as our understanding is imperfect, we bring a bias, and that becomes part of reality. So reality is much more complicated than that idea.
Well, and there's also large cultural components for the understanding of information, symbolism, the role of religions, and so forth, which drive all of that. I'd like, given that most of our audience have received a copy of the book but have not had a chance to read it in the last few minutes, as quick as people are here, let's talk a little bit about what the conclusions or what the key points. Why did you write this book? What's so special about The Age of Fallibility?
Well, let's say two points. One, that I want to bring home the idea that the war on terror is a terrible, mistaken, false metaphor that brings terrible results. That's a difficult point to get across, because everybody now knows that the invasion of Iraq was a terrible mistake. But people still think, on both sides of the political spectrum, in terms of the war on terror. And I would like to undermine or repudiate that metaphor. So that's one part of the message. And the other one is, what is America's role in the world? What should be America's role? How has America got to be different to regain the position that it is currently in the process of losing? And I argue that if you want to be the leader of the world, then you have a special responsibility to be concerned with the welfare of the world, not only, let's say, your own constituents. The rest of the world doesn't have a vote in Congress. Nevertheless, American leadership would have to be concerned about issues of common concern for humanity. And we've got several of them on which our continued prosperity and existence depend, like take climate change. We really got to do something about that, and unless America takes the leadership, we will not be able to get the common action. And here, for instance, the administration is lagging behind the public. The public is now aware of it. The administration is in denial. Nuclear non-proliferation. It's a much bigger threat now than it was in the Cold War, because then there were only basically two players. Now you've got many players. So that's another issue. Then what do you do about tyrants like Saddam Hussein? The way we went about it was the wrong way. But the world has a number of these tyrants around, and we do need to do something about it. And it does need some legitimacy, some international cooperation to deal with the likes of Saddam. So just three examples, there are many more. War, by its very nature, creates innocent victims. There's no way to wage war without creating innocent victims. Now, if you wage war against an unknown hidden enemy like terrorists, the danger of hitting the wrong people is that much greater. And then when you wage war on an abstraction like terror, well, there's a multitude of sins that you can commit under that rubric. And so war, taken literally, is the wrong way to fight terrorism.
So what's the answer to that part of your point? If it's not a war, but we are threatened, what's the answer?
You have to defend yourself against terrorism. You've also got to take into account what actually is behind that terrorist. In other words, you don't put all manifestations of a certain kind under one rubric, one abstraction, terrorists. Hamas was brought into existence by the occupation of Palestine by Israel. Hezbollah in Lebanon was brought into existence by the Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon. The Iraqi insurrection was brought into existence by our occupation of Iraq. So, you know, if you just sort of declare war on terror, you actually may create a lot of terrorists in the process of hitting innocent victims, because that is in fact what brings on terrorism. Now, that's not to excuse Al-Qaeda. I mean, there's no, I can't see any justification for it. So, but you can't just sort of separate yourself from the consequences of your actions and say, well, the terrorists, you have to wage war on terror, and anybody who can be possibly accused of being in that category, or anybody who happens to be standing in the way, you can do whatever you like. So this is this false metaphor separates us from them. You see, we are the victims, right? They are the perpetrators, and so we can hit them. But who are they? And then we hit the wrong people.
Right.
And they see us in the same light as we see them. So this is where this incredible difference in perceptions has arisen, that where America today is seen as a threat in the rest of the world.
Well, I'm sure that the pictures in the Arab world of the innocent people being killed are not helping the sides on either side, and are certainly inflaming local population. Another point that you make here and you've made before is that America, because we have been the sole superpower, has a distinctly different responsibility, a higher responsibility, and you've used those words in one way or the other. Can you explain that? What is it that we should do differently, or why is the standard different for us as opposed to another country?
Well, you see, the current world order is based on sovereign states, and there are many of them, and they all promote their self-interest, that they're guided by their interests. And so are we, and so we should be. But there are common interests that we have, like maintaining peace, etc. And you need some leadership. Somebody has to lead for collective action. And that is the role of the leader. We emerged as the sole superpower. Before that, you had two superpowers, and they were sort of in some kind of balance with each other. Actually, it was a mad balance, mutually assured destruction. Right. That was the basis of the world order, right? That world order has dissolved. We were left as the sole superpower. And therefore, it's our responsibility to lead those initiatives, to strengthen international organizations and strengthen international law. Now, the American supremacists or neocons say international law doesn't really exist. It's a matter of power. And of course they are right. But international law ought to exist. And if you say it doesn't exist and you disregard it, you actually destroy it. What we ought to be doing, we ought to be strengthening it. Now, this idea of international cooperation has a terrible reputation in the United States, which is the result of a concerted sort of educational project by the right wing. And that has to be radically revised, because if we want to be leaders, then we actually have to lead and accept that we are dealing with a world of sovereign power, so they won't always do what we want them to do. And we have to build consensus, and we'll never quite reach anything approaching perfection. So the United Nations is a very limited kind of international organization because it's an association of sovereign states, very difficult to forge consensus. There are 5 powers that have veto powers, so we can't just sort of have it our way. But nevertheless, it's in that framework that we have to work.
I'm still frustrated by not knowing the answer of what we should do.
But
do you have, off the top of your head, what would you do in Iraq? What would you do in Lebanon? What would you do about all the treaties that we're either adhering to or not adhering to? You're obviously not supporting the current political climate and the current president, but the voters will have an opportunity to discuss that at the appropriate election time. What would you do now if you were president and you were in charge of foreign policy, or the Congress and you were unilaterally in charge of foreign policy for a day?
It's a very, very good question, a very difficult question, because you are, in a process that is, you're far advanced in it, and you can't just sort of make it disappear. So you can't actually, for instance, pull out.
So you can't just pull everybody out of Iraq right now, is what you're saying?
I don't think you can do it. Okay. I mean, we have to get out of Iraq, but we have to get out in an orderly manner and try not to leave behind a very large-scale civil war, because we are currently in that process, and it's
just to test this. Imagine a situation where the Civil War terribly gets worse, American lives are at risk, and we face this very difficult choice of do we keep our Americans in or do we withdraw?
Yes. I think
how would you make that decision?
No, I think we have to be determined that we've got to get out. We get out either in an orderly manner or the way we did in Vietnam with the helicopters picking you off the out of the green zone. It's much preferable to get out in an orderly manner, leave something behind that is relatively stable. How could you get there? And I've given this quite a bit of thought, and it's clear that it would have to be some kind of an arrangement where the various factions agree on the distribution of oil revenues. That's the key, because that's the main source of the Iraqi state. And actually you have to create conditions where you generate new revenues. In other words, where you can have an auction bringing in oil companies for new concessions. For that, you have to establish a legal basis for the oil concessions. And that has to be the objective of any kind of an agreement that would leave something behind. Because that would be not a zero-sum game of fighting over the existing revenues, but a positive-sum game, because you would be generating new revenues. Now,
let's start with some questions from the audience. We have some microphones. We have one right here. And again, remember that you're live and on broadcast.
Many Western European nations in recent decades have faced and managed to defeat essentially very strong terrorist movements with a variety of different reasons for existing, from the Red Brigades in Italy to IRA in Britain to the Basque terrorism in Spain. What metaphor could best describe the way these bloody terrorism movement have been defeated? Maybe police action, maybe a re-education, maybe a removal of motivation by sharing power in Northern Ireland. And isn't it terrible that it seems that the United States isn't looking at this recent experience in very similar nations to inform its metaphors and its perception and its dealing with the terrorists it's been facing?
Yeah, I think you make a very good point that there have been a number of terrorist movements, and they don't necessarily have the same motivation. They have different motivations, different contexts, and therefore putting them all together is a distortion. It's an abstraction.
So I have two questions, and they're not related to terrorism or your book, but it's sort of related to your early career as a financial trader. So my father, who's in Hong Kong, read all your books on reflexivity, and he tried all your techniques on stock market, and it just didn't work out for him.
Well, at least you're telling the truth.
And so I'm just wondering, sort of, if you want to be able to flip a coin like 100 times and be able to get heads all the time, all you need is 2 to the 100th coins, right? I mean, So, do you see yourself, like, your investment philosophy as something, like, do you have this, like, what's your secret sauce? Like, do you have this principle that you hold on to over time that has helped you profit, or is it more of a luck thing? That's my first question. Second question is regarding long-term capital management. So you know how the Nobel Prize laureates have failed in that particular incident when Russia defaulted on their sovereign bonds. So I was wondering whether you have any insights on quantitatively based trading methods actually have any future.
Okay. Well, the secret of my success, actually, I can now tell you. It's,
okay, hold on.
since you ask me.
Thank you.
I'm always wrong. I'm always wrong. And I try to correct my mistakes. That's the secret of my success. As far as the quants are concerned, I mean, they're very successful models, but they all have a flaw in the end. And eventually, if you persist, then the flaw becomes apparent. The war on terror came about because the Bush administration decided to exploit the very real fear that people felt as a result of that attack. The fear was very real, but instead of doing what President Roosevelt did and say, you have nothing to fear but fear itself, the Bush administration went out of its way to exaggerate the threat. So the next time it was going to be in the form of a mushroom cloud. It wasn't enough that 3,000 people died and the towers collapsed. Next time it's going to be an atomic. So it was an exploitation of fear to mobilize public support behind a president who's, commander-in-chief, and you have to salute and accept his orders instead of criticizing him. Criticizing him is unpatriotic.
Your old friend Jim Rogers has argued that countries of people that don't want to be together should be allowed to fall apart, like Yugoslavia or USSR. Do you think that's true with Iraq, that we should just let the Kurds secede and the Sunnis and the Shiites separate? And second, have you had a falling out with Jim?
And what?
Did you have a falling out with Mr. Rogers?
Well, that's a private matter. It concerns others. But Iraq, that is a public matter. And I think Iraq is falling apart because the factions are all pulling apart. But I think if you want to avoid a civil war, similar to what happened in Bosnia, you've got to hold Iraq together because of the oil revenues. See, Iraq is based on oil. It's Bosnia with oil. So you can't actually divide it because the Sunnis then have absolutely no oil on their territory, and they would have to fight for oil.
This question might seem a bit premature considering all the problems that we're facing now, but in the past you focused on promoting an open society outside the United States, especially in the developing world. Today you're focused on promoting that within the United States to an extent and dealing with the issues of terrorism, etc. What do you think the problems that are going to be facing society will be in, I don't know, 5 to 10 years from now, and what do you see yourself focusing the effort of your foundations on in the future?
Well, first of all, while you hear about my involvement in the United States, the foundation is still working, and I am still deeply involved in what goes on in the rest of the world. So that hasn't changed, and we are engaged in promoting open society everywhere. And that, I don't see that as changing, and I think it will continue after me. I now think that there is a role for the continued existence of the foundation, and this support is difficult to obtain because philanthropists don't like to meddle in political arena. People, happy to work on health and so on, but supporting civil society, there aren't many. And that I see as a continuing role for the foundation throughout the world. I came to this insight in South Africa, which has, one dominant party would be able to change the constitution.
How do you see the trend to narrowcasting? Narrowcasting.
Narrowcasting. Serving small networks of people with specialized information.
Obviously, I don't know anything about it.
Well, no, you do.
Well,
we have because we have an administration. We have an administration that was elected because there were enough people who believed a certain line that it was close enough to be stolen, or close enough to win, whichever you want to. But it was the fact that it was even close is amazing to me, and the idea of narrowcasting, that if you control two sources of news and opinion, namely Fox News and evangelical ministers, and this is the way of disseminating opinion to half the country, it seems like things like the Bush administration will not merely be an outlier, but will become the norm, and they'll be just the way things are.
Well, I mean, this is one of the real puzzles that I'm addressing in the book, but I can't say that I'm sort of have anything like the definitive answer in the book or altogether. And that is, how come that you have independent and pluralistic media? Nevertheless, you have conditions very similar to 1984, where there was a Ministry of Truth that controlled the information. So how could the same kind of distortion of truth be perpetrated with pluralistic media? And one of the answers is that people don't care about the truth that much. I mean, people in America care about success, and it doesn't matter how you get there. So this pursuit of truth, which has a long tradition, enlightenment and so on, is at the moment, I think, in trouble. So that's the public. In other words, you can blame the leadership, but you also have to blame the followership. So that's part of the answer, but it's not the only one. And obviously there is the concentration of the media, the concentration of the ownership, but then you have got internet and the new media, which ought to some extent countermand it. And you do have a right-wing propaganda machine that acts by basically constant repetition of a distorted point of view. And I'm just currently
You've seen this movie before. I mean, you've seen this movie before. You survived this movie, you know,
yes.
60 years ago.
And you know, that's what led me to say that I'm reminded of the Nazi regime, and I got into a lot of trouble for saying that. But I'm currently trying to understand in what way the propaganda is similar to what was used there. And I'm just sort of beginning to identify some of the tricks that are being used, and I'll probably write about it in the next few weeks. Our politicians want to get elected, so they, you know, run focus groups, and they try to find out what you think. And if they find out that that's what you think, then they'll stand for that.
So my question is not about the war on terror, but I actually have two questions having to do with your roles as a financial trader, philanthropist, and someone who's been involved in the transition in Eastern Europe. So one question is that the basis for capitalism is supposed to be Homo economicus, who pursues rational self-interest, and then the invisible hand makes everything work out. So the first question is, what is your view of the relationship between altruism and capitalism? And the second question is, we've heard a lot about the ills of a repressive government versus an open society. So what is the use of government at all, or can society just be sort of self-organizing? Those are my two questions.
Well, let me take it the other way. I think the answer is no. I think that you can't avoid the need for government. And actually, you know, market fundamentalists argue that you leave it to the markets, let people make their own decisions, and everybody pursuing their self-interest will serve the common interest. It's a nice idea, but it's unfortunately, or fortunately, false. Because markets are only designed to allocate resources among competing private needs. They are not designed to take care of collective, common needs. And that requires government. You see, that is what requires government, including maintaining markets. If you didn't have regulators, financial markets would collapse. So you do need government. And I think, coming to your first question, I think that being concerned with the common good is quite a rational thing to do. So I don't see it as being in any way in conflict with rationality or even Homo economicus. And if I decide to use my money for philanthropy, you know, that is one of the elements that come. I spend money, and it can be accommodated in the market system. So I don't see a problem. But I think, and I think that philanthropy can, you know, do some good. But to think that private philanthropy could replace the role of government is a false idea also. And actually, in my philanthropy, we very much try to influence the way the government spends money.
Have you found any particular kinds of things to say, you know, soundbite or longer, that you think are helpful in talking to people who don't agree with you?
Well, unfortunately, I can't put it in a soundbite, otherwise I wouldn't have put it in a book.
Otherwise, maybe just keep talking and smiling.
Abstract war on terror, creating a lot of, well, it's hurting a lot of innocent people. You said people, but I also think it's hurting a lot of innocent abstractions like the Fourth Amendment. in the name of the Patriot Act and other things, which are actually, I think, more scary to the survival of this nation than anything else in history. But there was an implicit comparison that you made between Israel and the United States, and maybe I misheard or misunderstood, but Israel invading Lebanon in the last few weeks doesn't seem to strike me as a close comparison or parallel to the United States going out of its way to invade Iraq. I mean, Israel was attacked directly, and you may say, well, only 2 of its military people were taken, etc., but Israel has been dealing with a 6,000-year-old blood feud for a long time with its older brother, or Isaac's older brother Ishmael. So I think my personal take is it's different, but what's your take on that?
No, you're absolutely right, and maybe I should have made that point. I'm glad that you are bringing it up so I can make it. There's no question that Israel was attacked.
First, I'd like to thank you not just for the big philanthropy you do, but also the smaller. I volunteered with a small group, a despised, oppressed group, prisoners, and your organization made a donation to them, and it's made such a difference. My question, I'll preface it by saying that Google aspires to be an open society where employees can question and criticize decisions made by the leaders of the company. We do that all the time. One of the most controversial ones has been Google's decision with China that in order to be able to have a service that the Chinese government won't try to block, Eric can correct me if I'm missummarizing it, we agree not to allow searches on certain words. And some people, the company takes the position that it's better to give the Chinese most access than no access, while other people think Google's being evil. I'd like your opinion.
You can direct your response to me.
I would say two things that may be relevant. One, that if you somehow it comes up in the search that this site is blocked, I think that is, to me, would be satisfactory information to provide at the request of the Chinese government. I think that would be valuable information for the Chinese search people who are searching. I think that would be a very good way to handle it. Now, how to maintain certain standards? I think that it's important that the industry establish certain standards and agree to abide by those standards, because otherwise, let's say Google might take a higher position, and others would undercut it by providing that service. So here you need to have common standards to which all the entire industry subscribes, and then you can actually maintain those standards. When I established an American branch for the Open Society Institute, that was one of the first issues that we took on, the war on drugs, because the war on drugs is doing more harm than drugs themselves. It doesn't mean that drugs are okay. They do cause a lot of damage, but the war on drugs has caused a lot more damage. So actually that was one of our first projects, and little did I know that I'd be waging war on the war on terror 10 years later.
Thank you.
You have changed markets, you've changed societies in many ways for the better. I think a lot of people give you very strong credit for your role in opening up literally the end of the Cold War, bringing a lot of things that were worries of my generation to a point of peacetime. And I think we all wish you Good luck.
Before you applaud, let me just correct you on that again. I'm sorry. I really appreciate, I really enjoyed this conversation, but I can't change markets. I'm sorry.
Do you know where I got
can anticipate markets.
Do you know where I got all my information? From Google. Okay. Thank you very much.